What's going on, everybody? Teach back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my Week 8 NFL Power Rankings. An exciting week of football in the books, and we're knocking on the door of the midway point of the NFL season. Hard to imagine, but if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit that like button. If you're around here want to see more football content, just hit that big red subscribe button, and let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Who's your favorite team? Where do you think they should slot in here in these Power Rankings? Love to hear your thoughts, and I respond to every comment down below. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the Houston Texans, after a loss against the Raiders, and I don't think the score is fully indicated by the actual score of that contest. Like, that game felt a little closer, but nonetheless, sorry Texans fans, you're rebuilding, and you're probably going to be a team that's selling at the deadline. This is an interesting time to kind of talk about buyers and seller possibilities here. The Texans probably looking to sell, so if you want to go back and check out my 12 trades I want to see video, Jerry Hughes feels like a guy that makes a ton of sense. Brandon Cooks, add some years to that contract and maybe lighten the cap hits. I could see a contender being interested in that. So, yeah, I think it only might be a little bit more rough when it comes to the on-field product moving forward for Houston. Lions, hey, they're down to 31. I think they started the season not even on this bottom 8 screen. I think they were like 24, my very first, preseason power rankings. Man, have the mighty fallen. And, you look at being shut out by the Patriots. Sure, yeah, Bill Belichick. We'll talk about the Patriots here in a little bit. Yikes. Then you get a bye week and you come back and you score 6 points. Now, granted, Jamal Williams' first career fumble, right? At the goal line, weird, fluky stuff kind of happened. But, yeah, just as quick as Ben Johnson's name emerged as a potential head coaching candidate, it immediately cooled off. So, tough spot there if you're a Lions fan. The defense, it feels like it's made some progress, but it's still not a great unit all in all. You get the, Aiden Hutchinson sacked this past week, Jeff Okudah plus safety coverage. Not a bad, way to, close off or, try to limit one side of the field. I think there's some things and positives to take away from what the Lions put together and put on the field this week, but you're a one-win team, and a lot of people were betting you're over on the, 6.5 win prop. Long way to go to hit that. Panthers up a handful of spots, and, look, hey, you beat the Bucs. I think that might be a reflection on how bad the Bucs are right now. But I do want to give credit to the Panthers. Chuba Hubbard looked great, and of course Carolina's already traded Christian McCaffrey. Kind of give my thoughts on both ends of that trade, as well as some of the other moves being made. But from a Panthers perspective, hey, look, just to get the money off the books, it was going to be a win. Just moving off of Christian McCaffrey and where this team's winning window is, made all the sense in the world just to move on. So it's a positive grade from that point alone. You get 4 draft picks, and while some people are going to be like, no first rounders, that's not. Sometimes it's about more swings of the bat. A 2, 3, 4 this year, 5 next year. That's what this potentially new GM might have. If not, Scott Federer, with a lot more assets to play with in the playground, and then try to set up his new head coach for success. So I think the deal makes a ton of sense. I'd probably go B+ there for Carolina. Then we get to the Chicago Bears, taking care of business against New England. What a weird game that was. It felt like the Patriots had no answer for Justin Fields' legs. So hopefully that's still something we see a whole lot more of moving forward. The passing game itself, still things to be desired. But, even like end arounds with Dante Pettis, it felt like the offense was doing its job. Luke Getsy, I think, really did his best, at least some of his best work this season, try to get people open, especially considering we're talking about the Bears wide receiver room. So impressed from that standpoint. And then that Bears defense, outside of like the 2 Zappe, touchdown drives, there was not much to be had. I think they did a great job. And that's a Bears defense that, is feeling a little depleted. And you know what? We saw a little bit from Robert Quinn. Now, was that like a, hey, please somebody trade for me, like, look what I can still do? Or was that like, hey, I'm just going to turn it on. I'm going to be a beast, from here onward for Chicago? That's kind of an interesting opponent, something to keep your eye on there. But if you were to ask me, it's probably like, hey, look what I can still do. Please make a trade for me so I can get out of Chicago. Anyways, let's move on to the Commanders now. In a week where the Panthers beat the Buccaneers, the Bears beat the Patriots, and the Commanders beat the Packers, focusing mostly on the Panthers and the Commanders. They were my 32 and 31 teams last week, and they beat 2 teams just outside the top 10, and that's with plenty of weeks of disappointment, baked in. Those were 2 teams in my top 5 to start the year, if not top 5, top 8 for sure. So, wow, how the mighty have fallen, and, give credit to the Commanders. Specifically Terry McLaurin, you see the picture on your screen. Him and Jair Alexander was an awesome matchup to get to watch, and Taylor Heineke is not good, but at least, as much as like you can appreciate Carson Wentz wanted to, share the sugar and try to get it out to, John Dotson, Curtis Samuel, let's get everybody involved. When push comes to shove, Taylor Heineke is only looking in one direction, and it's for number 17 in maroon, or, whatever the Commanders are wearing that week. So that I kind of like that just because it's like Terry McLaurin's not going to be forgotten, but if not for Scary Terry kind of being a freak and being able to win some one-on-ones against one of the best corners in football, the Commanders, do not win this game. But hey, couple big throws late, and that's kind of the Heineke experience. It can be rough, but then sometimes if the throws come at the right moments, you can eke one out. Broncos, they did lose to the Jets, but that was with Brett Rippon, and I'm like, that's not really going to be the identity of this team moving forward. Russell Wilson sounds like he's going to be back next week anyway, so yeah, they lost, but also, I had to keep them above the Commanders, Bears, Panthers, just because I do see there's a little bit of a tier difference because of how good that Denver defense is, and this comes from somebody who loves the Carolina defense, which balled out this past weekend, so maybe there's an argument to be made Carolina and Washington should be flipped, but I think the Broncos defense is on another level. So I give the Broncos that little bit of a courtesy nudge over those three that make up 29 through 30. Then we get the Jags again. They lost, but as much as people were like, hey, 2-1, this team's turned the corner. Trevor Lawrence is going to be the guy, and I wasn't really on that hype train. But this team at 2-5, not too bad. Like I think they're a decent 2-5 team, and I don't think that record really indicates how much better they are compared to last year. So I think this team. Give them some more time. They'll continue to piece together. Like what Doug Peterson's kind of building towards in the offense, it just feels like a couple more throws from Trevor Lawrence, and that team might be there. They also still feel like they could use number one, and that's why, going back to my 12 trades video, I'd love to see this team, even if it's just like a Kendrick Bourne, somebody who's had success with a young wide receiver, hit someone who can then potentially, make Christian Kirk option 2, Zay Jones option, things like that. So still think there's some pieces missing, but, despite the loss, they went down to the wire with, a one-loss team. So no matter what you think about the Giants, this Jaguars team definitely showcased a lot of fight. Also want to talk about the James Robinson trade. ETN, we finally started to see a little bit more burst. He's kind of gotten better week over week. He did get hawked by Kayvon Thibodeau, but let's just give Kayvon Thibodeau props there. But nonetheless, did you really need two running backs? And honestly, it just kind of created a little bit of a an uncomfortable situation probably for the two, where it's like Robinson's probably a starter somewhere, and ETN should probably be a starter somewhere. It's like, how are we gonna work this out? There's plenty of committees in the NFL, but it felt like those two guys were, I don't know, it felt a little different. But anyways, they move on from James Robinson, send him to the Jets. Love that deal from the Jets' perspective. If they couldn't, especially considering whatever the price tag is for Kareem Hunt, James Robinson is probably cheaper than that. So probably significantly cheaper than that. So yeah, I like that move a ton, and that way they can continue to have their identity through the run game. But we'll talk about the Jets in just a little bit. But first, we talk about the Cleveland Browns, and man, weird game there against Baltimore, and Baltimore's so streaky. Can they close out games? Credit to the Browns for making it interesting in the fourth quarter. But, as good as Nick Chubb is, this team, it's hard to win games with a run-first identity, especially when your defense, better this week, but, still been underperforming based off a lot of people's expectations. Again, better this week, but, how much of that is, you get the late fumble from Lamar Jackson, and it's kind of Lamar's issues and turnover proneness, you could say, over the last couple of weeks, kind of lingering into this one. So I don't know who to give credit versus who to blame in this one, but the Browns are hanging tough, and they're playing with Jacoby Brissett, who isn't bad as a fill-in starting option, but he's not the best starting quarterback. And a game between him and a former MVP and Lamar Jackson, even weak Lamar Jackson performances, more than likely give you something more dynamic than what Jacoby Brissett brings to the table. Let's move on to the top 24. Pittsburgh's going to stay put after a loss against Miami. Actually, real quick on the Browns, Kareem Hunt feels like a logical trade candidate. So, the Jets getting James Robinson, it kind of feels like Tampa Bay would be the team that makes that move, give Brady a check down option, but also I could see where it seems like not thinking about how the offensive line is bad, and that's why the run game's not going anywhere. I could see them saying, hey, Leonard Fournette's just not the same guy. Let's go ahead and add Kareem Hunt. So that'd be my prediction there for the Kareem Hunt trade. Anyways, let's talk about the Steelers. Man, weird game, right? Like, you watch the opening drive for Miami and you're like, okay, yep, Dolphins by like 1 million. There's just no answer. And the energy is just off the charts because of Tua's return. And then, that kind of immediately dissipated after that first drive for Miami. So Pittsburgh just kind of hung around. They hung tough. And, the big difference is coming down with interceptions. I mean, that drop pick from Cam Sutton, that's one of the most gimme picks I've ever seen. It's the type of throw that Tua gets made fun of because he underthrows the receiver, and it's just kind of a lame dunk lofted in your direction. And Cam Sutton, maybe he was closing his hands too quick because the ball took so long to get there. I don't know, especially on slow-mo, it's kind of what it looks like. But that is such a gimme. You got to get that. And that takes points off the board for Miami. Versus, Noah Igbenogany's making this ridiculous toe tap, sideline pick to kind of seal the game away. And I think that was more so like Kenny Pickett felt like he needed to make a play late in the game, needed a touchdown, forced it, didn't get the receiver reaction, and then Igbenogany makes a great play. So that's the difference. Like Sutton drops a gimme, Igbenogany's going above and beyond to come down with an awesome interception. So I do want to talk about Kenny Pickett just because, again, somebody who wasn't crazy about him in the draft process, feeling better about him as an NFL quarterback just because, there's enough traits. And, one, maybe it's just because of his ability to scoot. And, you see him, that 12-yard scamper where he gets a first down, slides down. It's like, if you're a Steelers fan, you have not seen that type of movement in a while, considering, he's replacing Big Ben. So that's impressive. But, as much as, he's suffered with turnovers, that Igbenogany interception, again, I think he's just trying to make a play late in the game, and he was just kind of, put it into a bad spot. He was kind of backed into a corner. I think that a lot of these mistakes he's learning now, and the turnovers the turnovers that are happening are just going to become learning moments. So at least that's what I'm hoping. Maybe I'm just kind of turning a corner and just becoming an hopeful Steelers fan here. But I think there is going to be something positive that comes out of all the turnovers that we see from Pickett right now. So just give him some time, let him be a rookie. And that's kind of the best way I could describe it. You see some flashes, you see some bad, he's playing like a rookie. I think that might ultimately be the best thing for the Steelers as well. Have a bad record this year, add some young talent, another offseason, and then this team maybe can get back on track. But probably going to be picking the top half of the first round. So I think that might be all the better for Pittsburgh long term. But yeah, for this year, until they get TJ Watt back, the defense isn't full strength. 4 dropped interceptions is unbelievable. How do you do that? This game easily could have turned on its access. And then Kenny Pickett, playing like a rookie. One last mention here, another rookie, George Pickens. That dude might already be one of the best wide receivers in the league at locating and body control and bring it in contested catch / spectacular catch type of opportunities. That dude is insane. So let's move on to the Falcons now. Down a couple spots, and as somebody who was taking Atlanta to cover this week, not the performance I would have thought. So yeah, I think it's part of it. You run into a buzzsaw. The Bengals offense is fully turned back into the hands of Joe Burrow. We'll talk about them later on, and they're just airing it around. They're chucking around the yard. So there's only so much you can do when you run into a hot team that's moving it well through the air. You don't have Casey Hayward. AJ Terrell gets hurt pretty early on in this one too. So by basically by halftime, this team's secondary is completely depleted of its talent. So tough scene, bad matchup. And as much as we're Arnold Ebikete's had some moments, he's been okay. This team still needs pass rush. And Grady Jarrett's good, but they need some more guys. Right now it's just not enough there, and Jarrett's trying to do everything. Ebikete's impressive for a rookie, but he's impressive for a rookie. So, it's just a defense that's a little bit away. And then they start falling behind. I don't think the offense really ever settled into what it wanted to be. And realistic, if we're being honest with ourselves, this is a Falcons team where if they get to play from ahead because of that run game and how Arthur Smith schemes it up, that's when they're more dangerous versus playing from behind. Granted, they have awesome pass catchers and they can play from behind. I think the team is obviously it's most dangerous when it's playing from ahead, gets the run game into an even mix, and then you can use those pass game weapons off of it. So kind of a tough game plan there or game script there for Atlanta, and just ultimately didn't break their way. Next, Indianapolis Colts lost to the Titans. Sam Ehlinger is the story here. I don't know. My disappointment and frustration with the Colts as somebody who took them to win the AFC South has not necessarily been, I never really blamed Frank Reich because I've always liked him. And the defense was unhealthy, starting to get better, starting to get healthier, yada, yada, yada. It's just Matt Ryan's not the same guy. He's washed. And now he's hurt, and that kind of gives way to Sam Ehlinger. So is this going to be, a Taylor Heineke replacing Ryan Fitzpatrick situation where it's this maybe is better, and then it just kind of becomes more of the same, and maybe even worse just because the arm talent's not there? Or, I don't know, the spunky, mobile quarterback that where, Matt Ryan, they were kind of pivoting the offense to be this, shallow depth of target, get the ball out quick type of offense. And Ehlinger's arm's not really all that great, so that might be an offense that kind of caters to him. And again, you can use his legs. It might give you a little bit more to play with there than Matt Ryan, especially, Ryan hurt right now. So it's kind of interesting. I can see this going one of two ways, where one, it's just more bad, and this team continues to not be all that good. And, they're playing like a day 3 quarterback. Or maybe he's just kind of spunky enough and they win some weird games, right? The Commanders just beat the Packers. something like that on a consistent basis. Maybe the Colts. Maybe the Colts get back into it in the AFC South. That's a bad division. There's nobody that's really eliminated from that, other than the Texans. And I don't know, Jags 2-5, they're probably out of it. But between the Colts and the Titans, that's an open race between those two sides, despite the Colts being swept. That makes it tough. Anyways, Cardinals come away with a nice win on Thursday Night Football. Credit to their defense. A couple of nice pick sixes before the end of the half. I think it was the first time that Arizona's covered their first half spread all year. So it's kind of precarious that it took the two defensive touchdowns to be able to get there for a team that's known for their offense. Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray, but I digress. Congratulations, step in the right direction, and now you got the long week, chance to get carry that momentum moving forward. DeAndre Hopkins certainly looked awesome in his return, so love seeing that. Now you'll get to really only one target for Robbie Anderson, so I'm excited to see where this offense kind of moves forward and how the wide receiver position plays out, and then eventually get Hollywood Brown back, and next thing you know, that D-Hop, Robbie Anderson, Hollywood Brown trio is sounding kind of nice in Arizona. Then we get to the Seattle Seahawks, and I might need to move the Seahawks up a ton more. Honestly, like another big win this upcoming week. They play host to the Giants, and this team is on its way up. I am fully in. Like, where I don't really buy into the Giants being serious contenders. I mean, they're knocking on the door of the playoffs right now at 6-1, so they may well get there, but I don't know. This Seattle team is, they're kind of piecing together this rookie class. Fantastic. I mean, Tariq Woolen looks like a guy who's going to be starting on the outside for them for a while, and Kobe Bryant might be doing the same. Boye Mafe looked pretty solid. And minimum, that's a nice rotational edge. You have your bookend tackles with Charles Cross, Abe Lucas. Kenneth Walker looks like an animal. Yes, they drafted him in the second round, and that's not necessarily best value, but it's process over results, but man, the results are looking really good right now for this Seattle team. And then Geno Smith continues to do his thing. And he's just putting the ball in places where his receivers can make plays. Like that Marquise Goodwin play is touchdown is kind of encapsulates it. Yes, obviously J.C. Jackson comes down with a terrible injury, which I'm told probably hurt like hell in the moment. So that sucks. It's been a tough first year in Los Angeles for him. We'll talk about the Chargers later on, but that play, that ball was only going to be touched by Marquise Goodwin, even if J.C. Jackson did elevate. And he just kind of put his receiver in a spot for success, and he came down with it. You see that with DK Metcalf. You see that with Tyler Lockett. That touchdown against New Orleans is just an absolute dot. There's only one guy getting there, and Lockett got there. So this offense is just humming right now. And I don't know. Again, Geno just is not the same guy he once was. So I like this Seahawks team, which can't believe I'm saying that. I can't believe they're in the top 20 based off my preseason, kind of conception or visualization of this team. But yeah, the defense is kind of getting a little better. Still not great, but they're taking strides, and that offense putting points on the board. Saints, they lost to the Cardinals. You could probably flip those, but I think when you take into account that the Saints were just absolutely depleted at wide receiver, that plays a massive part in this. So I just don't think that's the full strength Saints that we saw versus the Cardinals. So, but if you wanted to, move the Saints down to 21 and bump up the Cardinals and the Seahawks, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with that. Then we get the Raiders up a spot. Handled business against Team 32 in the power rankings. You get one spot nudge. Part of that's also I need to move the Saints down. So there you go. But yeah, hey, how about Josh Jacobs, the guy on your screen? I mean, this guy's been balling of late, and kind of similar to Atlanta, where it's like, dude, when they can lean on that run game, and then it's kind of old school. And I hate that I'm saying this because I want to see people throw it. I want to see the ball in the air, but man, this offense just seems so much more efficient when it's run first and then passing off of it. Just like Atlanta. So they're certainly capable of playing from behind and living through the air and whatnot. They have pieces to do that. But, dude, Josh Jacobs is one of the most efficient runners in the league right now, which is just crazy because no fifth-year option picked up. He's playing in the Hall of Fame game. Yeah, bonkers stuff there. But ton of credit to him. He's turning his career around. Then the Patriots, dude, what a disappointing loss. One, you're 8-point favorites and you lose. So, that in general, you're just already talking about really rough look there. But now you have this Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi. Do you have a quarterback? Do you have one? Do you have none? What are we doing there? And I think, honestly, the way that game ended, it kind of opens the door for Mac Jones to come back in, kind of reset, kind of where this team probably should have gone. And it's almost like what the Cowboys did. Cooper Rush, that last start against the Eagles, was a tough spot for him to kind of look good in. And it kind of opened the door where, Dak Prescott doesn't really have to look that good because they're playing the Lions at home. So, even if Dak struggles, that's a winnable matchup. And Dak didn't look great, but they still won by 18 points. And you look at what happened this week, and it's like, yeah, maybe you should have just left Zappi out there, fed him to the Wolves. Granted, Chicago's a winnable game in my opinion. So I don't know. I don't really want to overthink the coaching because they were 8-point favorites going into this game, and the Bears defense this year has been lethargic at best. Robert Quinn really found another gear. They had a hard time running the ball too, which is super weird. Trent Brown, I think on that first drive had like 3 false starts, if not the first drive, the first quarter. Don't know what that was all about. And yeah, I don't know. That was just a weird performance from the Patriots. Maybe we can just kind of put that to bed. And next week they look that much better. Mac Jones feeling more comfortable, but that's definitely a game to monitor, because if they lose next week and it looks ugly, then this team might have a mean slide down the board. On to the top half of the power rankings, Packers and the Bucs, 2 major disappointments, down to 16 and 15, and both at 3 and 4. If they continue to be bad, then they're going to keep moving down. I mean, I just don't know what to say about these two teams anymore. They're just like massively disappointing. And both teams feel like they turned to paper mache the second they crossed the 50. I don't know what it is, but Tampa Bay in specific, can you please finish a drive? It's just the most bizarre thing I think I've ever seen in the NFL. I don't know if I've ever seen a team I had such high expectations for fall absolutely and nowhere close to that. Green Bay's still looking for a number 1 wide receiver. I mean, this was the storyline of the entire offseason, and it's now become a major storyline of the regular season. Nothing changed. So once the team adds a DJ Moore or a Chase Claypool or someone who can make an impact now, I mean, I think it's going to be rough moving forward for the Packers. And honestly, look at that touchdown from Aaron Jones. I mean, that might be their biggest mismatch they could try to take advantage of, is getting Aaron Jones against linebackers and against safeties who aren't that great cover. That might be the biggest leverage play they can go to, because right now the wide receivers just aren't it. And then for the Bucs, it's dude, I like Todd Bowles, and I wanted to get behind Byron Leftwich, but the only ingredient that's really changed from this year to last year is Bruce Arians. And now I'm just wondering, what was the difference? Was it just because of Arians being kind of a hard ass and keeping guys in line, or was it his play call? I know Leftwich was the play caller, but was it kind of his touch in the offense? I always kind of thought, it's Brady at quarterback. It's going to be mostly his offense, maybe with some shades and some wrinkles of something else. But dude, specifically this year, leaning on first and second down, early running plays, Leftwich is all about it. The run game hasn't been efficient. I want to see the ball in Brady's hands more. And then again, you get across 50 and that offense just collapses upon itself like a house of cards. And then you get drops from Evans, and Chris Godwin has 7 catches for less than 50 yards. It's all bad right now. This team is completely out of whack. It's almost like if it feels like you need to reset this team. When your computer starts acting where you're just oh, I just got to restart this thing. But you can't do that, obviously, with an NFL team. So really weird for both Packers and the Bucs, but they're massively disappointing this year. The Dolphins up ahead of them, and it wasn't pretty. Tua nearly threw 4 picks in that game, but that first drive was awesome. And after that first drive, you had 3 catches from Hill, 2 from Waddle. If you bet the reception props like this guy, you were feeling really good. Unfortunately, one of those 2 hit, but I digress. That offense, you can see what's there. And this was the first week where maybe it's just, Matt Canada's the play caller for Pittsburgh, Kenny Pickett's and rookie quarterback. But this was the first week where it's no Igbenogany looks good. This, I've been waiting for this basically his whole career, because I liked him a ton coming out of Auburn. But with the absence of Byron Jones, there has been a large absence on that other outside corner spot. And then there was time where Xavier Howard was hurt, and it was sheesh. Then Nick Needham. They've had a ton of injuries, so to see Igbenogany step up and come up with a big game, that is massive for that secondary. Also, Javon Holland, sustainable. More of the same for this Dolphins team. And they ran the ball really, really well against Pittsburgh defense. That I think especially at the beginning of the year was a little bit better against the run than I expected, but I think that's kind of regressed back down to the mean. But, hey, Miami run the ball like that. I mean, they're going to be a tough offense to stop. So I think, get to a more into the grain and more comfortable, another week back. I think this offense only gets more and more efficient. They're going to need it next week. Then we get the Jets up to 13. I mean, they just keep winning games. And it definitely wasn't pretty, but dude, that Denver defense is legit. Again, that's why I had them ahead of the Commanders, the Panthers, the Bears, those teams right below them. That defense is legit. And going 2 Mile High, especially early in the year, I don't care what the score is. If you go there and win, I'm impressed, because that is such a tough home field advantage to overcome. And then Breece Hall fantasy owner here in a couple of my 5 leagues, having 2 or 3. So, pour one out for Breece Hall, that's tough. That is just an absolute brutal blow, because he was just getting better and better week over week. I still like Michael Carter in that offense, but adding a James Robinson where Carter can kind of be the dash and Robinson kind of be the old school kind of lower the shoulder, traditional power back, which is kind of what Jacksonville had with ETN. So I don't know why that never really felt comfortable there in Jacksonville, but I like that duo, and I like how those guys complement each other in New York. And the Jets' identity has been through the run game. So you lose a Breece Hall, how are you feeling that identity? James Robinson, I think, is a nice plug-and-play option there. Pair him up with Michael Carter. You can continue to be that type of team. But I also want to talk about where the Jets team's going to be at this offseason, because, man, Zach Wilson just is not it. At least as of now, still plenty of football left this season. Maybe he turns more of what we saw fourth quarter against Pittsburgh into his norm. I'd love to see that. But now I think we're going to get into a spot where, like, I talked about Jimmy G maybe going to the Bucks, and, I think it was last week's power rank. It's just kind of off the top. Maybe it was my last mock draft. But, dude, the Jets obviously make a ton of sense there, too, because one of two things. One, obviously, familiarity with Mike LaFleur. Both spent time together in San Francisco. Obviously, Robert Saleh, former DC in San Francisco. All that makes sense. They know each other. But also just from, like, the perspective of, like, when you could get Zach Wilson off the field, right? Because you don't want to give up. You took him number 2 overall. You need a prime excuse to take him out. So depending on what, Garoppolo's contract and, what his financial demands are, I think they could bring him in, maybe let's just say a 2-year deal. And, it's moderately affordable. And it's one of those things where it's like incentive laden probably. And you can roll out Zach Wilson for 3 or 4 games early next year. And if he just looks like the same guy, it's like, okay, yep, we're going to make the move. And at least Jimmy Garoppolo will be able to facilitate. You get Elijah Moore requesting a trade, and it's like, well, why is that? Well, it's because he's just not getting a whole lot of opportunities to put the ball in space. He's not being put. He's not getting what he needs out of his quarterback. So Jimmy Garoppolo, yeah, all of his mistakes, he can spread the ball around. I mean, like, he'll put the ball in the hands of playmakers. So at least from that perspective, I can see where the Jets coach staff's like, yeah, that's an upgrade. So something to keep your eyes on once we get to the offseason. Then we get to the Rams. They're on bye week, so they stay at 12. Giants knocking the door of the top 10. They're winning my respect, man. If Brian Dable's not your coach of the year right now, then I don't know what you're doing. But that being said, they are winning games in flashy ways. But 100 plus yards this week on the ground for Daniel Jones. Saquon Barkley taking direct snaps. Like, week in and week out, they find timely stops and timely scores. Like, it's the most cliche thing I've ever heard. But this team just wins games almost like they're in a movie about a high school football team, and they're just kind of eking one out week after week. And it's like, just enough defense. We limited enough big plays and we created enough turnovers. And on offense, we're going to create big plays and limit, turnovers. And it's all that stuff that makes you kind of roll your eyes there. But it's like working right now for the Giants. So I don't necessarily think it's sustainable, just because I don't think there's a whole lot of talent to continue to have this team be just a one-loss team. Moving forward, I think eventually regression will hit, but hey, for right now, ton of credit to Brian Dable. And, ton of credit to Daniel Jones. He's kind of changed his identity. He's become a really decent, game manager. He's just keeping the ball clean. And then when you add in his rushing ability, as long as he's not putting it on the ground, he could be a guy who, kind of flirts with that century mark, randomly enough, despite, him and his stature. So, I mean, yeah, Dable's just tapping into every little bit of talent and skill set he has on the roster. So it makes me just really excited to see what he can do with a more talented roster and a roster that has more skilled players and can do more things. So I'm excited for the future for the Giants. And if you're a Giants fan, I know you're over the moon right now. Titans into the top 10 and took care of business against the Colts. That's a sweep. That's going to make it pretty hard for Indianapolis to come back and win the AFC South. But I do still think it's open because the Titans still feel like a 9-8 team. They're about for me. So I don't know. We'll see what Sam Ehlinger is all about in Indianapolis. But hey, the Titans, another team that's just kind of doing enough. The defense, it's had bumps. The secondary is not nearly as good as I thought it would be. Kind of with my expectations from last season. But this week you get Bud Dupree. You finally get some pass rush out of him. Danico Autry has a huge game against his former team in Indianapolis, and timely offensive scores. So and it's good to see Ryan Tannehill able to stay in that game, because I know at one point he was a little hobbled. So I'm interested to see Malik Willis, but I think if you're a Titans fan right now, you want to keep Ryan Tannehill, because case in point, they end around and Willis drops it. Like, I just don't think he's quite ready yet. And then at number 9, the 49ers. Yeah, they got, I don't want to say they embarrassed by Kansas City. They got Kansas City-fied. Like, that's the Chiefs. We'll talk about Kansas City later on. That offense was crazy, though. But I think the 49ers just found themselves underneath a buzzsaw in that Kansas City offense. And part of the reason they're not going to move down is they did make the Christian McCaffrey trade. So I talked about it from the Panthers' perspective earlier on. For the 49ers, it's like, I'd probably go solid C, because one, you added him into the offense with Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. It's just like any of these guys, you put them in space, and my word, the things that Kyle Shanahan can do. And like, it's just one trump card. Like, okay, sure, you stop Deebo Samuel. All right, well, I'll get George Kittle open. Okay, you had an answer for both that. All right, stop Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield or as a slot wide receiver. Okay, and I still have Brandon Ayuk as my fourth. It's just insane. So as long as Jimmy Garoppolo's not chucking at linebackers, that offense will be hard to stop. And then also just like envisioning Christian McCaffrey running behind Trent Williams is just like not fair. But anyways, I also look at this team and I'm like, some additional corner depth wouldn't hurt. Maybe a third safety wouldn't hurt. Some additional edge depth. Especially when Nick Bosa's battled injuries throughout his career. He's still a great player, but he's been banged up from time to time. That would be great. That interior offensive line needs to get better. And your second, third, or fourth would have been great spots to potentially draft a or maybe two starting interior offensive linemen. So it's that move just kind of took away a lot of the opportunities this team had to draft cheap starting talent. And they're going to have to roll with Trey Lance moving forward, because now I look at a roster that they're paying Deebo Samuel, they're paying George Kittle, they're paying Nick Bosa, they're paying Fred Warner, they're paying Charvarius Ward a ton of money. They're eventually going to have to pay, the way he's playing, Talanoa Hufanga. They're going to have to pay probably Brandon Ayuk. They're paying a ton of money to Trent Williams. And they're going to have to be paying a ton of money to Christian McCaffrey. So it's to keep any sort of financial flexibility, you have to have a quarterback in a rookie contract. So it's going to have to work with Lance. So based on your thoughts and emotions on Trey Lance, that might dictate your mood and how you kind of interpret that being said. But let's leave San Francisco. Let's head into the top 8. The Chargers, I am worried, especially J.C. Jackson out for the year. Look, Asante Samuel Jr. has been a stud, and I think he can be the lead corner on that team. But that J.C. Jackson, signing was was a big part of why I thought this team could win the AFC West. Him gone, I think, just takes away from some of the ceiling this team had. But, he's also given up a ton of coverage busts, so maybe it cleans up this defense for right now. But you look at what happened this week where that defense just get torn. Again, ton of credit to Seattle. Ton of credit. I like that offense. But come on now. And then, this team continues to... they are inept at being able to stop the run. And they sold out against the Browns and still could come up with an answer. And then Kenneth Walker took their soul. So that team's got some serious flaws, and this team could be having a mean slide down the board, because I say this week in and week out. So defensive concerns aside, please, Joe Lombardi, stretch the field. My man, get Justin Herbert to push the ball down the field. And maybe they just need to add a speed weapon. Maybe that's a deadline move, whatever. But my word, you've just got to tap into that arm strength. You've got to be able to flip the field. You've got to get some big-time throws out of this guy. And until they do, I don't think this team's going to hit their full potential. So, Cowboys up a spot. It wasn't pretty against the Lions, and it's another game where I think the score could have been a little bit closer than what it truly was. 24-6. It didn't really feel like the true outcome of that game. And again, Jamal Williams fumbled at the goal line, his first career fumble. Weird stuff happened. But, for Dallas, I think it was Tony Dungy who said it on the Sunday Night Countdown before Sunday Night Football, and he said it perfectly. If it was him, I hope it was. Everyone shares the burden. And, when it was Cooper Rush, you take a little bit less talent at quarterback, and it's okay, well, who can make up for that? The defense, the run game, and not really the playmaker. But, some chunk plays on the ground, and that defense ascended into elite tier. Now you have Dak Prescott back. And in specific next week. But, this week he was kind of shaking off the rust. Wasn't great, but, still good enough to win. Next week, second week as a starter, that much, more into the rhythm of it. I think he'll be better. And I look at an improvement there, and that's less burden on the defense. I don't know, maybe it's just the former baseball player in me where it's and as a former pitcher, it's when I know I have an offense that can put points on the board, I feel like I can challenge guys a little bit more, and feel like I can get away with a little bit more, and I just feel more comfortable and more myself on the mound. I think that could be true about this Dallas defense, which sure you may look at that and be like, oh, well, they still need to be more the same. They got to be structured. They got to continue doing what they're doing. I don't want them being loose or sloppy. If you interpret that as that's going to make them sloppy, I can understand that concern. But to me, it's just now they can, Trevon Diggs can take a little bit more chances. Maybe that leads to more points on the board. I think the defense can just play loose and free. Hey, if we give up 7, it's not the end of the game. We can just be us. I think that defense, it's hard to imagine them getting better, but they might just because of that. So it's kind of an emotional aspect I'm trying to monitor there. But I think Dak Prescott's just going to continue to get better with some time as he gets more and more back into the full swing of it, ingrained in that offense. I think you're going to be all right. And I think this team makes a good sense as a logical buyer here, trying to get a number 2 wide receiver. I think that makes a ton of sense as well. So excited to see what the future has for Dallas. Then we get to the Bengals, and dude, when the Bengals offense, just like last year, when they turned the keys over to Joe Burrow, they can do crazy stuff. And this picture goes so hard. The picture and the thumbnail, the Bengals, media team, the photographers, they're doing justice. They're doing God's work in a lot of ways. But anyways, when it's Jamar Chase just bodying, especially once AJ Terrell leaves the game, it's just dude, Jamar Chase is just on another level to even average NFL quarterback. It's just not fair. And then you add, 150 plus yards for Tyler Boyd. Didn't even need T. Higgins all that much this week, but that's the dynamism of this offense. You can do a whole lot with it. So as long as the ball continues to be in the hand of Joe Burrow, I think this offense is going to put up a ton of points. But it will be interesting to see them against a tougher defense and one that maybe just comes up with a few more stops. And it's right now it's easy to say, yeah, the Bengals offense is awesome. They're elite. They're great. When Burrow's chucking it and Chase is coming down with it, they're great. There's going to be a team that gives them a challenge. And, what is Zach Taylor's response? Does he kind of fleet into a shell and kind of start running the ball more? Or does he continue to do what he did this week and, trust his, pass game weapons and trust Joe Burrow, who is the face of the franchise? So just something I'm, again, continuing to monitor. We're still having questions about the season. I'm looking forward to answers. The Ravens. Definitely wasn't pretty against the Browns. Almost choked it again in the fourth quarter at home. I don't know what it is about Baltimore. In so many ways, that run-heavy offensive approach should be the last team that is forfeiting leads, just like Kyle Shanahan and everywhere he goes. But that he's known for that run scheme. He should be the last person who's giving up big leads to opponents, but they just seem to be the guys who do it. So that's tough. I think Lamar Jackson is a pretty streaky guy, and you saw the late turnover, the fumble. That kind of gets Cleveland back into it. Don't think this was the best game, but you definitely felt the return of Rashad Bateman in this game. That was a huge addition to this offense. Still think they could use one more wide receiver. Maybe, just John Jackson, given more than 2 or 3 days, after him signing, that's the last wrinkle they need, because I still think they need that burner over the top that can, once safeties creep up, they could beat him over the top. So I don't know. I don't know what trend I should take into for Baltimore. Is it the Lamar that I saw at the beginning of the year, felt like an MVP candidate, or is it what I saw the last 3 weeks, who struggled with turnovers? So he's streaky. I just got to find which Lamar is going to settle into, the fold the rest of the way for Baltimore. Then we get to the Vikings. They were on bye this week, but the way the board kind of shaked out, had to move the Chargers down. Everyone else slotted up a spot, as you can tell. So Vikings are now in the top 4 and only one lost team, so they deserve to be. Then the Eagles on bye, Bills on bye, so they both stand put at their respective spots. Then we get the Chiefs, who dominated that offense. Again, not dominated, but dude, that offense was just, that is when this team is rolling on all cylinders, that's what it looks like. That Kansas City offense was a machine on Sunday. Mecole Hardman's making big plays. The ball's just getting out, all over the field. That's Andy Reid. Round of applause. That was masterful what he did on Sunday against a really good defense. Yeah, a little banged up, but an awesome defense done the same, nonetheless. So just really impressed there by that offense. And it just makes me excited for what, hopefully we get in the AFC Championship game between Bills and Kansas City. Also do want to hit on one last thing, just because they were talking about it on This Just Football. It's one of the shows on the Pro Football Focus, kind of podcast network. But thought it was kind of an interesting talking point. Where do you put the Eagles on here, and how should you do these power rankings? And I think they kind of had a good analogy for it, and I kind of wanted to explain why I continue to have the Eagles at 3, despite, I know they're the last undefeated team. I've said this the last couple of weeks, but I kind of want to dive a little bit more into it before we close out. But I just think, one, if the Super Bowl were today, neutral field, Eagles-Bills. I think the Bills probably favored by 2.5. I might go as far as 3.5. Put them on the hook for the field goal. Maybe it's just 3 even. And if it's Kansas City, especially after what we saw Sunday, it's probably 1.5. I think it's still Kansas City 1.5 over Philadelphia. Tell me what you think about that. I'd love to hear your comments on that. Do you think it'd be the Eagles favored against those two? I just don't think it would be. And then even if you take that component out of it, if the Super Bowl were tomorrow, let's just say it's a pick-em between the Bills, the Eagles, and you have to put your next month's rent, your next month's mortgage payment, whatever that, large sum of money that would make you nervous to have to get this right on one team or the other. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find people taking the Eagles over the Bills or the Eagles over the Chiefs, again, especially after what we saw Sunday. So just trying to, explain why I have them at 3. And I think, after listening to that conversation, that discussion, I was like, hey, that's something meaningful to talk about, and kind of that's pretty much my justification here. And the way I do these power rankings is hey, if, Team 5 were to play Team 6 and, I had to bet, my next month's rent, I think I'd take Team 5 over Team 6. In this case, Team 1 over Team 2, Team 2 over Team 3, and so on and so forth. So some of that is, a little bit more washy once we get into the 20s and, even the teens, where it's these teams are kind of tiered. But I think there is a true point of difference between the Bills, the Chiefs, and then the Eagles, which it's not necessarily a full tier below them, but I think the Bills and the Chiefs are tier 1. These guys would be my pick to win the Super Bowl right here, right now. And then the Eagles are a half tier below it, because they're probably my pick to get in the NFC side right now. And then once you get in the Super Bowl, it's a game. Anything can happen. The Bengals almost beat the Rams last year, and the Rams, it could truly come down to a couple plays, and it could flip on its axis. So I think they're like a half tier below, and then you get to the Vikings and the Ravens, the Bengals, who are a full tier below. I think the Bills, the Chiefs, and a half tier below then the Eagles. So just kind of, explaining myself, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section of these power rankings. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? What do you think about that top three? Do you think the Eagles should be one, or do you think you understand my logic and why I have the Bills and the Chiefs ahead of them? Love to have your thoughts. It's a conversation down below. Respond to every comment, so let's talk about it down in the comment section. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It seriously would help me out a ton. If you're new around here, want to see more sports content, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.